Honorable Mazzoni.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, I'd like to start off with discussing the Public Protector's report and entitled The State of Capture. And I'd like to start off by saying you are 100% right that certainly you weren't accused of seeing Mr. Atul Gupta, as you said earlier. The Public Protector spoke of Ajay Gupta. You spoke of Atul Gupta. And what the Public Protector said is that there were 58 telephone calls between Ajay Gupta and Brian Molefe between August 2015 and March 2016, that at 19 times at or near the Gupta's Saxonwold compound, you were there between August the 5th and November the 17th of 2015.
The compound? At
the compound, at or around the compound. Now, what makes these times relevant is because they coincide with the acquisition of Optimum Coal by Gupta-owned Tegeta. Now, Mr. Molefe, my first question, based on what the Public Protector, her observations, would be this. At the now infamous press conference, where you read your statement, and you were there with Dr. Ngubane, and to refresh your memory, it's the one where you cried. You spoke of a shebeen, and you told the South African public that you were not at the Gupta's Saxonwold compound, but in fact at a shebeen near Saxonwold. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me that every South African in this country is interested to know about the shebeen, and journalists have looked for it, and certainly many politicians have driven around the area looking for it. Would you tell this committee where exactly the location of the shebeen is?
Chairperson, this is a very respectable hearing, and I would appreciate it if members did not manufacture facts. If you read, or if you had been listening to the statement that I had read, because I read it out because I knew that some members may not read it. Paragraph 53, and let me read it again. Paragraphs 5.96 to 5.101 deal with my phone records and make some notes, not findings, notes. Although the Public Protector makes notes, she did not ask me for my side of the story. 55, paragraph 56. Paragraph 5.97 refers to contact between myself and Mr. Ajay Gupta on a number of occasions. These are the occasions that you're talking about. The Public Protector fails to provide any other details about the phone calls. She does not provide the phone numbers, nor the dates and times when the phone calls were made. It is therefore difficult for me to determine the veracity of a claim in paragraph 5.97 of the report. Where I talk about Mr. Atul Gupta is where the Public Protector says, I made one phone call to him, and I say that was not the phone call. Mr. Atul Gupta did call. The phone was not answered because there she provided a date and time, and I was able to check in my records. There was a call at exactly that time that she says the call was made to the second, but I did not answer the phone, and there is no record in my phone that I returned that call. That is what I said, not the facts that you are now, Ms. Mazzoni, trying to manufacture. Now, secondly, on the issue of the shebeen, I will let you know that I complained to the press ombudsman about the Sunday Times reporting that I said I was at the shebeen. The press ombudsman asked Sunday Times to apologize because I had not said that I was at the shebeen. What got twisted was what I had been saying, and when I went on, if you go and listen to the video properly, and not just what the journalist had written, if you listen to the video that was recorded when I was making that statement, I also said, every day when I leave home and I go to Eskom, I pass within 1 kilometer of Teasers. And when I go home, I pass there on the highway in Midrand. It's just, I get picked up by the same tower as the tower that is at Teasers. Will you therefore come to the conclusion that I was at Teasers every 2 times a day during the week? And I made that statement in that context. The Ombudsman ruled against the Sunday Times, and I am surprised that some members of the press continue to publish that I said I was at the Shebeen. I wasn't. It was investigated by a retired judge. He was at UNISA. I forget his name now, with a bald head here. And he found that I did not say that I was at the Shebeen.
Right,
So it will be better that we do not manufacture facts and sensation, Ms. Mazzoni.
Right, let's not manufacture anything here and read exactly from a quote from Thuli Madonsela, Advocate Thuli Madonsela. She says, and I quote, "We have evidence from a driver who recorded the registration numbers of cars coming in. He has a whole book of high-profile visitors, including Molefe." That's at the Saxonwold Shebeen. Will you please tell this committee a simple yes or no answer? Have you been to the Saxonwold Gupta compound?
When did she make that statement?
She made it recently.
When? When did she make that statement? Where was it?
It is completely irrelevant when she made it.
No, it is relevant.
She has made the statement, and I'm asking you now,
No,
did you or did you not ever visit the
I cannot
Saxonwold
comment
compound?
on it. It is not part of the official documents. I do not know
But
where
it's a yes
and
or
how.
no answer. Either you've been there or you haven't been there. That's what I'm asking. Have you ever been to the Saxonwold Gupta compound? Yes or no?
Yes, I have.
You have. Fantastic.
I have never denied that I know the Guptas. I have said in this committee that I had been invited to Diwali. I have met the Guptas. Incidentally, at about the same time, on the 30th of August 2015, we suspended the Tegeta contract to supply coal from the Brakfontein mine because of the quality issues. The Guptas were very angry with us. They requested meetings, they phoned, and there was a lot of exchange to the point where eventually we agreed with them that because they were disputing, they were saying that the people that are saying their coal is not of a good quality have been paid by the opposition and people that don't like them. So we took the coal to the South African Bureau of Standards to get tested. During that period, I did have contact with them and we spoke about that issue, but I have said in this committee that I have known them for some time, since they came into South Africa. They tried to do a deal at the PIC that never succeeded. So I knew them from that time. I have never denied that I know them. But that does not mean that I have done anything wrong as far as they are concerned.
Right, let's talk about your time at the PIC. There is an 11-month...
With respect, Chairperson, my understanding was that we were going to talk about the Eskom issues and
Chairperson, with respect, if Mr. Molefe wouldn't keep interrupting me, he would see that I'm creating a chain of events.
But I'm trying to object to your raising the PIC because that is not what I understood to be called here for. And I am not prepared, I have not prepared to talk about the PIC.
Chair, may I finish my question?
PIC.
Because it actually has nothing to do with the PIC.
Mr. Molefe, yes, you have a right to say yes or no. And also you can indicate if you feel uncomfortable. But the member has a right also to ask a question. For you, just respond in the manner that you feel that is comfortable for you to respond.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair, Mr. Molefe, you worked at the PIC, and then you worked at Transnet, and then you worked at Eskom. In between working at the PIC and Transnet, you had an 11-month break. Did you work or do any consultation work for the Guptas or any Gupta-owned company?
No.
No. All right.
And if you're interested, I can tell you what I did, but I did not work for the Guptas.
No, that's fine. Chairperson, the ex-Minister of Mineral Resources, Mr. Ramhlodi, says that on an occasion, Mr. Molefe and Mr. Ngubane pressured him to help the Guptas take Glencore coal mine in 2016. What is your response to that allegation?
I've spoken about it.
I'd like you to, I can read, but I'd like you to respond to me, please.
No, I'll read it again for you. About the time of the sale of the Optimum mine, the Department of Minerals announced that Glencore's mining licenses have been suspended. That is on page 24 and 25 here, which is a newspaper article talking about the suspension of the contract. The reason for the suspension was that Glencore had not followed due process in the proposed retrenchment of their workers. The effect of the suspension of the mining licenses would be to guarantee the suspension of coal supplies by Optimum to Honrina. We were relieved when a few days later the suspension of the licenses was withdrawn. Minister Ramatlhodi has said we tried to get him to suspend the licenses, but he had in fact suspended the licenses, and that is in the press reports.
Why would Mr. Ramatlhodi lie? Why would he say that there was pressurization if there wasn't?
I don't know. And I've never said Mr. Ramatlhodi lied. I have a lot of respect for him. He's very senior to me, a senior member of the ANC. I have never said that he lied. Perhaps maybe he made a mistake, or maybe he had forgotten some of the facts, but I have never said that he lied, and I would never say that he lied. I respect him immensely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Trillion. During your tenure as CEO of Eskom, the relationship between Trillion and Eskom well and truly blossomed. In actual fact, I'll give you some dates because I've realized you enjoy dates. On the 14th of April 2016, an amount of 30.7 million rand was paid by Eskom to Trillion for a corporate plan. On the 10th of August, 113.3 million rand was paid by Eskom to Trillion for management consulting. Coincidentally, also on the 10th of August 2016, an amount of 122.2 million rand was paid for a financial advisory service by Eskom to Trillion. And on the 14th of December 2016, an amount of 152.8 million rand was paid by Eskom to Trillion for management consulting fees. Now, in a question that I asked Minister Brown about Trillion, I asked her about whether or not there was business going on between Eskom and Trillion. And Minister Brown answered no and not applicable to the follow-up questions. Now, she's claiming that Eskom did not tell her and give her the truth about the relationship between Trillion and Eskom. Do you know why the incorrect information was given to Minister Brown, which then led her to mislead Parliament?
When was the incorrect information given to Ms. Brown?
In a question that I asked her earlier in the year.
Which year? This year?
Last year.
I do not have details of what happened there. I do not have details of those transactions, and I'm sure that Mr. Singh can shed light on them.
But you see, this is what I'm finding worrisome, Mr. Molefe. You were the CEO. That's the Chief Executive Officer of Eskom. It is the largest state-owned entity. It is a monopoly that has the ability to hold our country's economy to ransom. And on 10 occasions, at the very least tonight, you have said to myself, colleagues, to Advocate Vanara, that we must wait for Mr. Noj Singh to come and answer these questions. Surely you, as CEO of this enormous entity, this powerful entity, you have knowledge of amounts of money going into the hundreds of millions of rands, and you know what's going on in your company, because if you don't, you failed very badly at corporate governance. And that not only reflects badly on you, it reflects badly on the way Eskom is being run. So I fail to understand why you cannot give me details, because if you didn't know, then were things deliberately being kept from you? Is that your assertion?
Now, I can understand why you fail to understand. The committee sent me a letter with specific issues that the committee would like to discuss. That the Trillion was not in the list of things. I would have gone and researched it and jogged my memory about what happened at Trillion. But for you, Ms. Mazzoni, to come here and hijack me with a transaction that happened on a specific date, a specific minute, while I was at Eskom. In Eskom, there are millions of decisions that get taken, billions actually of decisions that get taken on a daily basis by Eskom employees that do not require the CEO to know about. There is a procurement decision that is being taken today at Majuba Power Station. There is a procurement decision that has been taken somewhere in Treasury. There is a decision that has been taken in the Treasury about Eskom bonds that the CEO will not know about on the spot or remember the details of after such a long period of time has elapsed, or even when the period of time has not elapsed.
So
it would have been helpful if you had indicated that you would have a desire to know about those transactions so that I can prepare for your questions.
let me make it easier for you then, so that we both understand, because clearly that's what we need to do here. Did you know that Eskom was doing work with Trillion? Yes or no?
No.
No. Right. Thank you for that blatantly honest answer. Mr. Molefe, I am one of the millions of South Africans who was deeply perturbed at your resignation / retirement / reinstatement, because I don't know what to call it yet. I'm one of the millions of South Africans who read what I strongly feel to be your resignation letter. And the reason I don't agree with you that it can be viewed as a retirement letter is because I quote from your very statement. You say in your second page, about halfway down, it's a one-liner. You say, I will take time to reflect before I decide on my next career move. Now, if you're retiring, you're not going to have a next career move. So how could we not, as South Africans, view this as a resignation letter? You state there clearly that you are going to take time and reflect before I decide on my next career move. Now, if you were retiring, I would expect perhaps a line to say, I'm going to take time and reflect and enjoy my rounds of golf and spending time with my family, as so many people who retire do. But you specifically mention that you're going to think about your next career move.
Yes. If you go to page 85 of the documents. Mm-hmm. There is a letter there addressed to Dr. Ngubane, Chairman of the Eskom board. I hereby request approval for early retirement in terms of the rules of the pension fund. I do not understand why you choose to ignore that letter as my formal communication with Eskom about my early retirement.
I'll tell you why I choose to ignore it, Mr. Molefe, because as a formal communique to the country, you, not me, not anyone else, you called a press conference and you read that statement to the country in which you informed the country that you would decide on your next career move.
Yes, I would decide. But what did I do? I applied for early retirement.
Mr. Molefe, I think you are grabbing at straws there, but nonetheless, I have a copy of...
The feeling is mutual.
No, there we go. That's great. I'm so glad we finally agree on something. I have the answering affidavit, the third and final one that Minister Brown has submitted, in which she says, on the 11th of November 2016, Mr. Molefe resigned as CEO of Eskom. I issued a press statement and found in founding papers that I respected his decision to resign. At the time I made the statement, I was not aware of the fact that Molefe had in fact applied for early retirement and that Eskom had on the 11th of November 2016 accepted such application. I was under the impression that this was a case of a unilateral resignation and nothing more. In particular, at the time, I issued the press statement, not aware of the following fact. An early retirement agreement had been concluded between Eskom and Mr. Molefe. This agreement, as I now understand it, was to construe Mr. Molefe's resignation as early retirement in terms of the rules of the Eskom Pension Fund. I would like to know from you, did you deliberately resign and then decide to retract your resignation when you found out that you would be able to apply through Dr. Ngubane for early retirement?
Ms. Mazzoni, as I was saying to Mr. Vanara, you would have to consider my press statement as a resignation letter, something that I dispute. I do not know that if I had issued the press statement and done nothing else, that I would have resigned. Or if I had issued the press statement and Eskom had issued a press statement, that the two press statements would have amounted to a resignation. I think the courts will have to determine the status of the press statements with respect to my formal employment and my employment contract at Eskom.
Now, Minister Brown is the stakeholder and Minister of Public Enterprises, of course, has very close dealings with the boards, executive boards of the state-owned entities. And one would assume that in a decision of the importance of the resignation/retirement of one of their CEOs, she would have a discussion with you about it. Minister Brown says, all of the correspondence passed without my knowledge. I was not party to the early retirement agreement between Eskom and Mr. Molefe. Did you at any time discuss the issue with Minister Brown, that you decided to retire or that you decided to resign?
I did, as a matter of courtesy, go to Minister Brown's house and talked about my impending leaving. The matter is in the matter is in the court papers. Yes, we did talk about it when I went to her house in Cape Town.
And did you tell her that you had decided to take early retirement, or did you tell her that you had decided to resign?
Minister Brown says her recollection is that I said I resigned, and I disputed that in the court papers.
Right. So there's a very clear dispute between yourself and Minister Brown as to the resignation or retirement. Now, you had a brief stint in Parliament as a Member of Parliament. You were sworn in very close after the time of your resignation/retirement. Now, if you retire, one assumes that you won't commence work and certainly be remunerated for it. But be that as it may, Parliament has an ethics code which members of Parliament sign and adhere to. And one of those is, if you have other remuneration or other employment, you declare it on a declaration of interest. When you filled in the declaration of interest while you were an MP, did you declare your retirement income from Eskom on your declaration of interest?
I can't remember that I filled in a declaration of interest. If I did, I would have, but I can't remember that I did.
Right, that's concerning. Did you, another rule of Parliament is that if you have any employment outside of being an MP, your chief whip has to sign off on it. And in your case, your chief whip would have been Jackson Ntembu, Honourable Jackson Ntembu. Did you have any signed agreement with Jackson Ntembu that you had alternative income? Because when you returned to Eskom in what was called a reinstatement, Eskom issued a statement to say you were simply on a leave of absence at the time, and that your employment / resignation / retirement actually hadn't taken place. So effectively that means you, according to the Ethics Code for MPs and the Powers and Privileges Act, you actually did not qualify to be a Member of Parliament.
Yes, I did not have other employment. I was a pensioner. I do not know if you consider a pensioner to be employed, such that they have to declare their salary or income. But I was a pensioner. At the time, I had a letter from the Eskom Pension Fund that welcomed me as a pensioner. I'm not aware of any rule in Parliament that precludes pensioners to becoming members of Parliament.
So Eskom then erred when they said that you had been reinstated following just a brief stint away from the company.
I had not actually, strictly speaking, been reinstated, if you read the court papers. My contract of employment was still valid because the early retirement had been void ab initio. It was a mistake. It was a common mistake. So the original contract of employment was still in place, and that was the legal opinion. And it is the basis on which Eskom asked me to return to work, because my contract of employment was still in place.
So strictly speaking, if your contract of employment was still in place, then you were employed by Eskom and you did not qualify to be an MP, strictly speaking.
No, I was not aware that the contract of employment is still in place, because I was under the impression, I labored under the false impression that I had retired. It is only when the mistake was discovered that Eskom agreed to ask me to return to work, because the contract of employment was still valid. And when that mistake was discovered, I promptly resigned from Parliament.
Right, I see Eskom's corporate governance is really under scrutiny here, because to make a mistake of that magnitude, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is worrying.
The pension fund as well.
And the pension fund as well,
Yes.
Indeed. It's very, very worrying. Tell me, Mr. Molefe, you have until November to pay back the pension money. Do you have to pay back that money with the interest to the pension fund, or have you reached an agreement?
We had reached an agreement when I went back, when the contract was continuing. Part of what we call the reinstatement agreement, but really which governed my coming back to Eskom, said that the money that had been paid to me would have to be repaid back to the pension fund. And I agreed, and I signed that agreement to say that I will pay back the money that had been paid in terms of the pension arrangements. But then that was rescinded.
So it was rescinded, so that money is in your bank account now earning interest until the 30th of November, where it gets paid over?
No, until the court determines what my status is. I don't know now what I am. I have been...
So we don't know either.
Yeah,
so
I
I think you're a colonel, aren't you?
yeah, that's common cause.
The matter will be determined in court, I hope next week. If not next week, we have to go to... You know, this thing is very strange, because now I went to the labor court, and the judge said, no, go back to the High Court on the DA matter. At the High Court, I'm a respondent. And a judge refused to hear my case where I was the applicant, asking, excuse me, what is my status now? Can the court please determine? And the judge says, go back to the High Court where I'm a respondent. So we're going back to the High Court, and I'm not sure what the High Court is going to say. We may have to go back to the Labour Court afterwards, and then we will get clarity of what is happening.
Now, Mr. Molefe, in your stint as an MP, MPs pay into the pension fund for members of parliament. Did you receive a pension payout from a pension? Did Parliament pay into the pension fund for you? And upon your resignation as a member of Parliament, were you paid any form of money for your pension from Parliament, or did they transfer any sum of money to another pension fund for you?
No, I don't know what happened to that pension. It was, I don't know, 3 months. I never followed it up. I was not paid that money. That was the contributions which I made when I was here. I never followed them up.
Do you not think it's strange that you haven't followed it up? Because, you know, if it's in fact you know, there's a lot of complications here. This is a very intricate web that we're developing here, because your retirement is now viewed to be void ab initio. Your contract at Eskom is now deemed to have never cancelled because your retirement is deemed to be void ab initio. Your qualification to be a member of parliament is now brought into question, because were you employed at Eskom because of the void ab initio? Should you have been receiving a parliamentary pension money? You know, and that's the government pension scheme. That's, you know, that's a lot of South Africans that contribute towards that scheme. The government pension fund.
Yeah, but it's not prejudiced. I did not take the money there. In fact, if anything, I made contributions, but I resigned from parliament. So those would have been resignation benefits. I'm not sure how much.
Are you sure you resigned from parliament? Now, I need to make sure you are 100% sure that you sent a letter of resignation to parliament.
Yes, I did.
Right. My last question, Chairperson. Mr. Molefe, I've been listening very carefully to what you've said about Optimum Coal and why the deal with Optimum Coal fell short and why the issue unraveled in the way it did. And one of the things that you brought to our attention was that Optimum Coal, A, they threatened to stop supplying, which would result in load shedding, and B, that they were going to charge us 530 Rand a tonne for coal. Now, yesterday, Glencore released a statement saying, and I quote, it's in the public domain, "At no stage did Optimum Coal Mine raise the topic of load shedding in its discussions with Eskom, and the last offer made by Optimum Coal Mine, while under Glencore's control, was 300 Rand a tonne until 2018. So there's a dispute now. A, did they threaten load shedding, and B, from 500 Rand to 380, which is quite a difference. Can I have your comment on that, please?
Well, they can come and testify here if they wish, and dispute what I said, but they did talk about there will be more load shedding if they stop supply of coal to Henrina. In fact, they didn't have to say it. It's just like that. They would have been if they stopped the supply. Now, 300 Rand, I don't know why that makes you comfortable, because increasing the price from 150 to 300.
So I didn't say that it made me comfortable. I said that I'm quoting directly from an article that said that the negotiation said 300. So let's not manufacture anything here. Quoting from an article, it certainly doesn't make me comfortable. I'd like to know from you whether that's true or not.
They had a contractual obligation to supply us with coal at 150 Rand until 2018. Agreeing to increase that by 5 cents would have been wrong.
Mr. Molefe, my last question for now. Do you have any overseas bank accounts, perhaps in Dubai or Switzerland, and are they declared?
No, I don't have bank accounts outside South Africa.
Thank you.